I'm going to play a chord. Sounds good, doesn't it? It's harmonic, pleasing, and even comfortable. Everything we do and think, everything we are, our concept of beauty is a product of history. If we are to understand ourselves, we must try to understand our history.
The Texas Boys Choir comes from all over the state and beyond.
Alito,
Arlington,
Austin,
Johnston,
Dallas,
Denton,
Fort Worth,
Grandview,
Houston, Huntsville,
Longview, Lubbock, McKinney.
Dallas and Houston and San Antonio, El Paso, Corpus Christi, Waco. My mom was born in Dallas,
I would have to tell them that it's the one of the jewels in the crown of the city of Fort Worth.
It was the most famous boys choir in the country. And people who didn't know about it were people who generally were not very interested in the finer things of life.
The choir itself was the most positive thing of my childhood. The alumni of the Texas Boys Choir I'm still friends with today.
I'm just glad I came. I mean, it was a good experience.
These boys, maybe when they're young, they don't realize what a big deal it is to having the opportunity to do all these things, but I think when they're older, they're going to really appreciate these experiences, because for me, I definitely will treasure those experiences.
The best part about being in the choir was having that unity with a group that could work and function under extreme pressure and in any situation, and to have a very holistic embrace of not only music but culture worldwide.
The boys' choir was started in 1946 by a gentleman called George Bragg. And shortly after it was formed, he realized that in order to get a larger pool of talent, because they wanted to have a world-class boy choir, not just a community boy choir, but a world-class boy choir, he said to do that, we must find a larger metropolitan area. And so the decision was to move to Fort Worth. And that's where the boy choir has been ever since. Fort Worth has had a long-standing tradition of respect for the arts and support for the arts, and so it was a good fit.
The whole idea of the Texas Boys Choir comes from the tradition of the lineage of boy choir, because that's how George Bragg was. He believed in lineage. Although he was quite a personality.
The thing that I appreciated about George Bragg was that he had very high standards, not only for himself in preparation of musical scores, in his preparation for rehearsals, his preparation for giving the history of the music, that the time period that all of us boys were performing. And he was a very tough taskmaster as far as his staff. He expected the same high standards.
No one really invented musical instruments. They just evolved. The great-grandfather of this instrument was the hunter's bow. And from that evolved the lyre that King David of the Bible played. The lute was already 2,000 years old when Nero fiddled while Rome burned. And although music is an alive and dynamic thing, its function as a sort of mirror for the human spirit has been constant through the ages. If you want to know what someone a long time ago did or said, you can read a history book. And if you want to know what they thought, you read their literature. But if you want to know what they felt, then listen to their music. And as you listen, as you travel on the wings of music to other times and other places, you will find that the ancient dreams and fears and hopes and joys of men are not distant and not forgotten, but alive. Alive in what Longfellow called that timeless, universal language of mankind.
We set the standards high and encourage the singers to reach those standards. That makes a huge difference in the quality of the educational experience. And for training us boys, we practiced 5 days a week. One of the things that I recall impressed me was they had us memorize all of the words to all of the songs before they gave us the music. And we spent most of our time practicing Kodai solfege and learning how to sight read using solfege. It's very important to know the heritage behind what it is you're singing so that you know what kind of emotion to put into it. We always told them the translation if we were working on a piece in French or German or Italian or whatever language. We always translated it for them word for word so that they would know what they're singing. Because not only does the voice reflect, but the face reflects what you're singing as long as you know what the message is.
And now, here he is, Ed Sullivan.
Thank you very much, Ralph Paul, ladies and gentlemen, my little chickadees. Now, this show tonight was really for the youngsters because our show is going to open with the Texas Boys Choir.
To be up there with some of the mainstream entertainment titans like Bob Hope and Ed Sullivan, I mean, opening up with, Ed McMahon, and then, Jimmy Durante, I mean, it's just one right after the other. I mean, national coverage, and we're talking about kids from, range age 8 to maybe age 12 at the most. I'm assuming back then they probably were overwhelmed with having all those cameras in front of them and a live audience and stuff, but to be able to stand there completely, professional and do choreography and stay on target with their music and everything else and look absolutely professional way beyond their years just speaks volumes of the discipline and the coordination that is still reflected in the choir today as it was when, I was in it. So it's one of those things where I look back at it, even at some of this archival footage that was way beyond my time being in the choir, and just feeling like, wow, there is so much history that I'm a part of, that it's like this big family that just carries on the legacy, being a part of all of that. It's really astounding, even today, to me.
The governor of the state of Texas, John B. Conley, declared October 6, 1964, Texas Boys Choir Day.
So to be in that group was unbelievable, and to be able to meet the people and to work with the people that I've met, that I've worked with, because I've sung under the direction of Roger Wagner and William Self in the big concerts that we had at Will Rogers, and to be able to meet Giancarlo Menotti at the opening of the Scott Theater, because we sang at the opening of the Scott Theater when it was, first built. So that was one of the things that we did there. We met him there. Like I said, to be able to meet Igor Stravinsky, not just sing Persephone, but to be able to actually meet him. And he came through, the choir was up there, and, of course he was 80 something, but brought him up there, and for him to tell us once again that he thought we were the best boys choir in the world, and we could get a chance to thank him for that accolade. It was outstanding.
La brise vagabonde a caressé les fleurs.
Look at pop culture, and you have people like the Beatles or the Motown era. Bands used to put 2 records out a year throughout the 1950s and 60s, and in the 70s it slowed down. And to see an organization like the Texas Boys Choir be able to keep that same pace is amazing. From 1964 to 1970, the choir put out a record called Lead Kindly Light of choral hymns. The Persephone, which was written by Igor Stravinsky, which during these sessions with Igor Stravinsky in California, he called the Texas Boys Choir the best boys choir in the world. And he did so because they were able to learn this very complex music, this operatic ballet, in 3 days. They knocked it completely out with the Greg Smith Singers, who were already widely acclaimed as a recording group. But this group of 27 young boys came in, sight-read the music, and 3 days later finished this piece, which was nominated for a Grammy that year. And the amazing thing was, that wasn't the only record nominated by them that year. They also did a record of music of Charles Ives, Music for Chorus, which won the Grammy. But when you think about the 4 records that get nominated for a Grammy, to have 2 of them by the same choir, recorded at the same time, and none of this music was on their performance roster. So to think that they did 3 records in 1 year, 2 of which nominated for Grammys, and then the following year went to Venice and recorded 3 more albums in a summer, which won another Grammy Award with E. Power Biggs, who is the world's most praised organist, largest selling organist, and the Greg Smith Singers again, and in the actual cathedral that the music was written in.
Wow, of course we started in the summer beforehand. This was in September of '67. We started in the summer beforehand, lots of rehearsals, of course, and at some point in time, the Greg Smith Singers came down from New York, and we had combined rehearsals. And then my recollection is that there was something like a month break after they left, and then we began our trip to Europe. We spent 3 days in Rome, just sightseeing kind of things, and then went on to Venice.
We would have to wait until it was closed down, so the choir would go in, and everybody would go in after 9 o'clock, between 9 and 10, and set up. And we were in both sides of the choirs were on 2 different sides of the main area. They had 2 choir lofts, and so on one side you had the conductor Vittorio Negri and the Edwin Tarr Brass Ensemble and E. Power Biggs on organ, and then you had some choir there, and then you had a major portion of the choir on the other side. And we would record then at night from, after 10 o'clock until 2 or 3 in the morning. And then everybody would leave, and then we'd all go and sleep in and, get up late, get plenty of sleep so we're good for the next day, and run around and do kind of sightseeing things, and then go back in. And we did this for, I think we were there 9 days. So recorded all of those within that time span, which was crazy and fun and unbelievable to be there. It truly was listening to the music that we made within the cathedral, because when we would sing and you would wait to hear it, you'd get the cutoff after, some of the great things that we did, the Jubilate Deo cutoff, and you could hear it as it went through all the various corners, and you could hear the echo and the reverberation of your sounds. For at least 4 seconds, you're just listening. And then just kind of take that relaxed time and, okay, that was good. That was amazing. So, great stuff.
You people are not going to believe what I saw in that box.
The Mysterious Magical Miracle Box was a television special filmed in 1969, and it was definitely a product of its generation, but it was a very interesting concept because it was the only time in the history of any type of network television that a special was created around an original concept for a boys' choir. You would see things like, the Muppets and John Denver, or a Dolly Parton Christmas, but nothing around a boys' choir, and definitely not something that wasn't just like the history of something. It was a complete departure from anything. Very 60s, very psychedelic.
It's supposed to be for children, but at the same time, it's more for a slightly more grown-up audience. It's got puppets, which most kids shows would have. However, they're looking in on a scene inside this box where you've got these choir boys, the Texas Boys Choir, and they're singing all different kinds of scenes. It could be something like an Edelweiss or something more in a church. I mean, it's just a lot of different scenes, and every time they look in the box, it changes. So in a way, it's kind of cool because it shows the flexibility of what the boys choir can do, and also just from one different kind of song to the next.
One elephant went out to play on a happy summer day. He had such enormous fun. La 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 la. He called for another elephant to come.
We went to New York. We were in a studio. We had some rehearsal we had to do. The interesting thing to me, again, looking back, is I had no sense, and I don't know that any of the boys had a sense of what this story that we were telling. It wasn't, the adults knew what was going on, not the kids. It's more, you go there, you sing here, and so forth. But yeah, that was another wonderful experience.
The puppets that were used in this are fascinating to me because you had the same people that made all the stuff for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. So even though this came out about the same time as the Muppets and you had Sesame Street, it really showed what was going to come next. And you have to give George Bragg credit for coming up with something that original at that point. Now it seems very common ground, but for the time, it really was something special. See it on television, and you saw these Mr. Rogers and Muppet-like puppets talking around, and you being a part of that. Was that just fascinating at the time, or was it just kind of like...
It was really a cool story. Again, remember, I'm an 11, 12-year-old kid, and the story that they wove was marvelous. I believe it aired like 4 o'clock Sunday afternoon whenever it ultimately showed. It wasn't primetime worthy material, but I think it was a good show for what it was.
1972, Mary and Howard Walsh helped fund, through the Walsh Foundation, helped fund a 6-week tour of Great Britain and the continent of Europe. We started in London, and we made our way up the spine of England and sang in lots and lots of cathedrals, all the way up to Edinburgh, and sang there. And then we took a ferry across the North Sea to Norway.
A 5-week tour of Europe, and from the time we hit Norway, Bergen, Norway, and had a standing ovation, our first concert in one of the stave churches there. It was raining outside. We had a standing ovation after the performance. We packed up all the robes and costumes and were headed back to the bus, and the people were lining the sidewalk, still applauding in standing ovation, standing in the rain. It was incredible.
Then from there we went through Germany, all the way down through Switzerland, down into Italy, all the way down to Rome, where we sang for the Pope, both in St. Peter's Basilica as well as the Pope's Summer Palace. And I remember distinctly that the boys and the staff received a special commemorative medallion from, actually it was not quite a medallion, it was, I don't know quite how to describe it, but it had the Pope's seal on it.
Doing High Mass at St. Peter's was another highlight of many. Standing at the high altar, that's at the very east end of the church, not the main central altar with the Bernini columns, but standing at the high altar in the back with the window with the dove in it. It was incredible. I'll never forget it.
And from there we went back up into France, where we stayed for a week at Le Côte Saint-André and prepared ourselves for the national telecast on French television of some pieces by Mio, which we performed. The boys with the sopranos and altos, and a French men's choir did the tenors and basses. So we were on national television there, and ended our tour in Paris, and the boys flew home.
Columbia Artist Tour was very much a family show. Our biggest audiences were in small towns, and we would pack the high school auditoriums. So the audiences wanted the boys moving and dancing. They didn't want a full concert. So the first half of the concerts were always big, heavy repertoire with piano accompaniment, and it was a concert classical repertoire. But for the second half, it was get out the costumes and put on a production. And George conceived of a whole series of songs based on Revolutionary War heroes. And he had met this fellow named Ray Charles. Not the Ray Charles, another the Ray Charles. He had met him, apparently, when the boys made an appearance with Pat Boone on the Pat Boone TV show. They made an appearance with him, and part of that show was a performance of Pat Boone singing Silent Night, I believe. And that soundtrack got lifted And the radio stations took it and broadcast it all over the place, and it made number one on the radio charts. The boys never got credit because they were just doing backup work on this TV station and nobody knew who the choir was. Anyway, the fellow who put all that together was Pat Boone's music director, Ray Charles. So he put together a whole history package. And he got together with somebody who was really fine costume designer and builder, because those costumes looked spectacular 24/7. The buttons were made out of the highest quality nickel. The stitching was incredible. The fabric was like iron. The kids couldn't destroy them. As much as they tried, they couldn't destroy them. And for part of the big finale, we had two flags that were 30 by 40 feet hanging from the back of the stage. One was a normal American flag, and for a wonderful trick at the end, they would pull the curtain, open the curtain for bows, and have a different flag changed during the curtain call. And it was a 30-foot, I believe it was was it a continental flag with the 13 stars? Yeah, as sort of a fabulous finale. So you had 26 boys dressed in brilliant red, singing and dancing to 25 minutes of kind of jingly tunes about Henry Knox and Deborah Sampson, all these Revolutionary War heroes.
In living color on NBC.
Hello, everybody. It's the 4th of July. Ricky Siegel, strike up the band.
It was a big TV production, one of those big star TV productions. They filmed it in Oklahoma City, but it was designed for a big 4th of July TV special, and they loaded in all kinds of stars. Kevin met several of them.
Right.
Tell us about them.
Dionne Warwick was there. Bob Hope. In fact, my twin brother and I were some of the senior choir boys, and we had the opportunity to present Mr. Hope with an award, and got to go into his dressing room right before we went. Went on stage and presented this to him, and it was really pretty neat.
And the boys were doing the Continental Soldier routine. They did one of the numbers from the Continental Soldier.
Did you ever hear of the sharpshooter Timothy Murphy and the important part he played in the Revolutionary War? Well, if you haven't, the Texas Boys Choir can tell you all about that. Here they are in an excerpt from The Continental Soldier. Listen to these wonderful voices.
I think some of the things that are really interesting about being in a boy choir, and the Texas Boys Choir in particular, everybody immediately talks about the travel, and the travel was great, but as a child, you're exposed to so many other aspects of being in the performance business. Everything from recording in the studio and what it's like to be in a professional recording studio, to working with choreographers and learning steps, and even things like being on television. And the Texas Boys Choir appeared on things like the Johnny Carson show. So it wasn't just all stiff-laced singing in boy choir fashion, but quite a bit of other exposure as well that I just can't think of how you get that type of experience outside of an organization like the Texas Boys Choir.
Whenever someone says to you the Texas Boys Choir, what comes to mind? What's the first thing that comes to mind to you?
Endless hours on a Greyhound bus. And
We would go out 42 days and sing 39 concerts for 42 days. That's a whipping. That's crazy.
It gets hairy at times, but it gets a lot of fun.
And it turns out that we have him more than anybody else, more than parents, more than anyone else. When he's at home, he's there to eat and sleep and go to school, but in absolute quantity of time, we have them, yes, we have them more often. And of course, when you're on the road, it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and you are headmaster and father and choir master and all of that sort of thing.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. A long way from home. A long way from Sometimes I feel like 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 lost away from a long way from home. A long way
The amazing thing about the Texas Boys Choir during the 1980s was you already had this choir that was established as international celebrities, but locally they were praised as heroes. All sorts of businesses used them for all of their advertisements on both newspaper, local magazines, and even television.
It's the Texas Boys Choir. Stetson cologne, easy to wear, hard to resist.
In the 1980s with Jack Noble White, the Texas Boys Choir really broke new ground. They had already won Grammys, they've appeared on television shows, they did domestic and foreign tours, and were world renowned. So what was left but to write something for NASA?
I think Earl was the first contact with them, and they had heard some of the stuff that we did together. We had a company together, so we were doing one piece that they had asked for, and I don't even remember what that was, and then they wanted an original piece. That's how Reach for the Stars came. Well, we had very good management in Japan, and they had done some wonderful publicity, and so we had, they were really treated like rock stars. I mean, they would follow the bus and know where it was going to be and all of that. So it was, a lot of it was that we had very good promotion and very good management. So that was fun. I had to sort of watch that the boys didn't get too big ahead with the whole thing, but anyhow, I've got some wonderful pictures of the boys signing autographs and all of that.
To put it in perspective, personally, I went from just dilly-dallying on the piano and playing for my family to performing on very large stages, you know, in different parts of the world, all within a matter of a few months.
And that was a fabulous time because we had more projects than we had boys. So we were juggling, and they were all premier projects. Fantastic. A bunch of you ran off to Australia to stay for 7 weeks.
Very enjoyable 7 weeks of my life that I will never forget. And it was one of the best experiences of my life.
First of all, the beauty of the organization at that time is, and I'm sure they were well aware of it, as a boy, it was something that I barely understood, and now as a professional musician and adult, now I understand just how this incredible balance that was achieved among all of them. I mean, they each have their strengths. But from Michael specifically, there was a piece, Gott in der Natur by Schubert, that he dangled in front of the tour choir one year. And we read it down, and it's this powerful, it's really rousing, exciting. And he didn't let us perform it because it didn't meet his standards that year. And that was huge to me. And that's something I think about now as I perform with groups, and as I decide what I'm going to prepare and share with groups. I think about the standard that he was teaching all of us.
The thing that has fascinated composers and listeners alike about the boy's voice is the fact that it has the capacity for such maturity just before it changes at the age of 12, 13. And it has a musical maturity that is obviously something that is more than just a child singing.
And for me, it's a real chance to expose young boys and their audiences to a really unique sound. I was struck in our last concert because I hadn't heard choir boys sing in about, a long time, like 30 years. So that experience alone, the quality of the sound of those voices is so unique and so special. And when you're a choir boy doing that work, you don't realize it. But then looking back, it's like, oh wow, that is a really unique, really kind of precious moment, because in 4 years and 5 years, those voices are gone and they shift into something else that, is hopefully better. But it's a real kind of transient moment of beauty that exists that you have to kind of take advantage of and say, hey, cultivate this talent, cultivate this musicianship, cultivate this sound.
John Crosby built this incredible opera company out in the hills of Santa Fe. And it is a thing of great beauty. And he was a man who had the passion for opera. And he was especially nuts about Richard Strauss's opera, most of which are heavy-duty German, really heavy-duty German repertoire. And he decided that over the course of time he was going to perform every one, including a number 2 or number 3, I can't remember which which was an obscure little thing that most people didn't want to hear, which was called Foyer's Note. It was a story, a medieval tale about the sacredness of fire and losing fire as one of the primal needs for the town. And for some reason, Strauss wrote in that opera a part for boy choir, which is basically just like Wagnerian boy choir writing. Huge, difficult 3-part writing. And John Crosby didn't have anybody out of New Mexico who could sing it. So he gave Jack a call and said, I'm going to need some boys to do this opera, and it's going to take about 6 weeks from rehearsal to the run, because they're a repertory opera company. So I took 12 of the biggest horns we had, loudest kids, and packed up the vans, and we spent 6 weeks out in Santa Fe. We stayed at St. John's College, and we had a blast, and it was great. Yeah, some of those guys got off the plane from Australia and got caught up fast, and then we packed the vans and headed out for Santa Fe in a matter of weeks. Yeah, they didn't see much of their homes that summer. Stressful. Pikes Peak was fun. We had to get up at 4 in the morning, and we had to be up on Pikes Peak to sing the national anthem. Actually, it was America the Beautiful, if I'm not mistaken. We had to be ready to sing that at dawn for the opening of the show. And again, it was a matter of getting 110 kids to look good and happy at 6 o'clock in the morning, which is hard enough for directors, let alone kids.
And now live from Colorado Springs as part of the centennial celebration, the Texas Boys Choir under the direction of Jack Noble White and the U.S. Air Force Band of the Rockies under the direction of Lieutenant Colonel Bruce Jilks. Take it away.
We did the World Cup in the heat of summer, and we probably had 100 kids in robes out on a soccer field singing the opening of one of the World Cup games. So it was a matter of getting them on buses, getting them all together, driving to the Cotton Bowl, and sitting out in the heat and trying to keep them from not overheating and blowing a gasket. It was very stressful.
The Texas Boys Choir is celebrating its 52nd season here in Fort Worth. And we celebrate weekdays with CBS because there's more to this morning.
Today, the Texas Boys Choir has blossomed as most organizations have. They're now a performing arts conservatory in Fort Worth, Texas, and inside that, they're lucky enough to find a conductor who has the passion to keep that tradition going. Brian Pretty has been with the choir this is his 8th season, and has been training these boys, and they're getting ready to do a 70th anniversary tour of Austria, and they have some new records coming out, and it's the first time in almost 15 years any of this has happened, and it's all because of his leadership.
I never really forgot about this boy choir sound, and so when this opportunity came up, I was probably an older candidate than they may have interviewed, but that actually played to my advantage in terms of experience. Basically said, we want somebody that can come in here and knows how to grow a program and make it successful. So I was the 6th choir director in 4 years, so I had my work cut out for me when I came. The thing that I guess my overarching concern when I came here was I knew the legacy of the choir. I knew what had been in the past, what things were like when they were there. My job, I felt, was to put the choir, remember these great times that it had been, but to build the program back to a level of respect where we were being judged when we sing, not on just that's good for a boy choir, but that's good for a choir, period. So in terms of the steps we took, the boys had not recorded an album in several years, so that was step number 1, recording an album. We did 2 actually my first year, the Pergolesi CD, and then Seasons of Song, which was basically a sampler of literature in the year in the life of a boy choir member. So it gives people a snapshot of what we do during the year. So we did go to Argentina as the only U.S. invited entity to South America to participate there, and that was also combined with a tour with Opus Cuatro, who is the most famous male quartet in Argentina. So the boys had also not appeared at any choral convention. So I set our sights on that because the boy choir had the Southwest quill in its cap, but there has been no boy choir to make the National ACDA in the history of the boy choir. So that's considered the most prestigious choral convention and honor American choir can have. So we were invited to sing that. What made it even sweeter was that because the choir structure is such that it's SATB, we were not allowed to compete in the boy choir category, which is trebles only. We had to compete in the college men's category. So we were competing with St. Olaf, with Concordia, with anybody else in college that had a men's group. We were working with the Fisher Foundation. I shared a vision with the Fishers about recording Baroque works that were written specifically for boys, and also to explore popular genres, more contemporary works, 20th century works, because the instrument can do that. The boys as an instrument can do that. So we were granted a 5-year program with them, and from those recordings sessions we hope to release 3 to 4 CDs, which will show the breadth and depth of possibilities with the boy choir.
The boys' choir is not about creating a group of 5,000 musicians around the world. The boys' choir is about creating a love for the arts.
You're educated about the world.
Something that we just have to maintain and make sure that this continues to go for another 100 years.
It wasn't about just the music. It was about raising young boys to be fine young men in the community.
We rehearsed every night for an hour and a half from 4:30 to 6, Monday through Friday. Many Saturdays we rehearsed, and I've told people that later on, and their eyes got big, and I can't believe you did that. It's what we did.
So when I think of the Texas Boys Choir, I think of a tradition of excellence, a long tradition of excellence.
And there were boy choirs all over the country, but they did not become famous. The Texas Boys Choir became famous.
I feel like a lot of what I've learned from the choir is going to stick with me for the next, 30 or 40 years, the rest of my life.
TBC also teaches you how to focus, how to be disciplined, and it teaches you life lessons that you never forget.
People have gone out and become, they're opera singers, they're, lawyers or doctors. They're passionate about what they do.
I would definitely recommend this to any young boy who wants to join the choir, because they will not regret it. They will not regret it for their life.